Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to a very, very exciting video. I can't believe I'm standing here in front of the brand new M3 and M4. I just want to say a massive shout out and thanks to BMW UK, to Chris and James for organising all this. This is literally a dream come true. I can't believe it. I've been here about half an hour and I'm very hot and flustered because I've been running around getting very excited about these two cars behind me. Before we do a walk around of the cars and have a look at the exterior stuff and the interior stuff, because there is plenty going on, not just the obvious grills that the whole internet's talking about. There's a lot more to these cars than those, trust me. I just want to go through what the UK is going to get at time of launch, which is now, because obviously, depending on where you are in the world, you're going to get different specifications at launch and throughout its life cycle. So in the UK, at time of launch, we're going to only get the M3 and the M4 competition. So no standard M3 or standard M4. So a bit like with the X3M competition, the X5M competition, the M5, as you know, for the past, 2 years now or so, or maybe a year and a half, we've only got the competition in the UK. So that will be the same with these cars. But to make it a little bit more complicated, that's not going to be the detuned version of the S58. We're going to get 510 horsepower, so the full amount of power, but just going through the rear wheels to start with. So the standard M3 competition and M4 competition are going to have 510 horsepower going through the rear wheels, and we're only going to get an auto option, which is now the 8-speed ZF box, so no longer the DCT 7-speed. Further down the track, so summertime next year, 2021, you're going to be able to order both of these cars in xDrive. There'll still be M3 and M4 competitions, and they'll still have 510 horsepower, but they'll have the xDrive system, which we find in the M5 and the M8. It's really cool that we're going to have both options available from summertime next year, but at time of launch, we're going to get a rear-wheel drive M3 and M4 with 510 horsepower. I mean, that's just music to my ears. What we're not going to get in the UK, we're not getting a manual option in either of these cars. The reason they've really done that is because of the manual uptake on the previous generation being so small. Obviously, the expense of introducing that into their lineup, etc. I'm a little bit gutted about that, I have to say, because I'm a big sort of manual fanboy, as you know, but I guess I am a small minority of those people that love manuals, and there's no doubting that an automatic box, as good as the ZF 8-speed is, and I'm sure the software updates and the tune on this one is going to be fantastic. So although it's a little bit sad we're not getting the manual, we're going to be left with a very, very good automatic box. So I can't talk about what that's like because I haven't driven it, but I am very excited about trying that out. I think what we'll do now is just have a quick walk around both of the cars behind me and have a look at some of the exterior features, because there's lots to look at. They're really, really aggressive looking cars. I love the way they look, particularly the M4 actually, which in the previous gen I've never really been the biggest fan of, but this one just looks really aggressive, especially in the flesh. So let's have a quick walk around the cars, then we'll jump inside probably the M3, because this has got some really special carbon bucket seats in it. They're optional, but we'll have a look at them in a minute. And then we'll talk about the interior, and we might actually get a chance to start it up at the end, because I've heard them and they sound fantastic. They really do. I can't believe that they've actually got OPF filters in them, but they have apparently. So yeah, wait around to the end of the video to listen to that. Let's start with the M3. M3's been around for about 35 years now. So this is actually the 6th generation of that iconic car. This is in Isle of Man green, which is one of, I think, 4 new colours. And I think it looks absolutely stunning. And I love the fact that not just BMW, but manufacturers in general now are bringing fruitier colours back into the range. It's not all black, grey, blue. You know, it really complements the car and it looks good. And seeing as this is such a special car, why not have it in a special colour? Also, the M3 Touring, as most of you know, is happening, and I'm delighted to say that it is going to be almost definitely coming to the UK, but that's still, I would say almost 2 years off. So we're going to have to wait a little bit for that, maybe the summer of 2022. But that's not a bad thing because this saloon just looks so good, as the last generation did. I mean, the styling on this is amazing. And I know that the talking point on the internet for, I don't know how long, the amount of DMs I've been sent about the grills over the past 12 months, at least probably, with the, you know, the leak shots that came out. You get over these grills very quickly when you walk up to this car in real life. Trust me, I know what you're looking at now is predominantly the grills, but they really work with the rest of the car. And the rest of the car is so muscular, like the previous gen M3, that you do forget about the grills very quickly. The bonnet, we've got these kind of two, I guess they're almost like nostrils at the top of the bonnet, which look really good when you're looking down on the bonnet. Around the front of this particular car, this is quite highly spec. So we've got the, I think it's the M carbon exterior pack on this. So we've got lots of carbon fiber going on, but it's not just aesthetic. So we're not just swapping a plastic black polished part with a carbon part. There's actually some changes around the front. So we've got some massive air intakes here, which would normally look like a sort of traditional mesh on the non-carbon exterior pack. This particular M3 is pretty well fully loaded with lots and lots of really nice options, including the laser lights that have got a lovely black surround on them, so there's no silver border. It's really nice. They just kind of fade into the bodywork and add a bit more aggression around the front end. Obviously the M exterior carbon pack, and just looking from here I can see those optional carbon bucket seats, which just adds so much again to the outside of the car. There's just so much to look at and so much to take in that it is very difficult in a short period of time in a fairly hot studio. I know we've already talked about the unique M bonnet, but what about the engine that's underneath it? Codenamed the S58, so it's the motorsport version of the B58, which is a fantastic engine. As you know, I'm a massive fan of the B58. The S58 is a 3-litre, straight 6, twin turbo, and it produces 510 horsepower, as we talked about in the intro, at least in these competition models. But we're talking 650 Newton meters of torque. Now that's a 100 Newton meter increase over the previous S55, which is a huge amount. And torque is really important because these weigh around 1,700 kilos, give or take. So the torque figure is always very important. And I'm sure BMW have learned a lot from the F80 generation in terms of power delivery, because the early F80, let's say 2014 M4s, well, they were very spiky. They had a horrible sort of spiky torque curve at the bottom and made the car feel very snappy. And then as we went through the life cycle of that car, right up to the CS versions, that snappy torque curve flattened right out and the car felt amazing. So I'm hoping that these cars are going to be very much like the sort of end of the last generation, but with more oomph, more power and more torque. So really excited about that. They've done all sorts to the way the oil circulates around the engine, all to cater for on-the-limit driving, track driving, so that when you're pushing this car hard, the car is not going to starve itself of oil, and it's going to work really well, because that's what they're big to shout about with both of these cars, is track this, track that. There's all sorts of apps and technology inside that I'm not going to go into too much detail about, because I'm sure a lot of others have, but there's lots of stuff that they talk about in the bump that I've been sent about, you know, how track focused these cars are. So super excited about trying this engine in this particular car, because it felt punchy in the X3M, but obviously that's about 300 kilos heavier than this. So really can't wait to try that. And it also loves to rev out, which is exactly what you'd want in an M car. I think the red line's at 7,200 RPM. So that's nearly 1,000 more RPM compared to the S55, which is just awesome and very exciting, especially when you've got 8 cogs to go through. So you're always going to be in the sweet spot of the power and the torque. There's effectively going to be 2 wheel options at time of launch, and both of the options I think are available in different colors. So this one's got the slightly lighter weight wheels on it. I think they look really good. I'm not the biggest fan of black wheels, but I say that. My M2 competition obviously has the beautiful 763M wheels, which are black, but predominantly I think black wheels don't always suit cars, but these ones do, especially with this green. You might also notice that the wheels are staggered, so we're talking 19-inch on the front, 20-inch on the rear, which in my head means that this car is a serious bit of kit. It's set up not only for ride quality and comfort, but also for handling. It's not just set up for aesthetics, because they could have easily put a set of 20s, you know, all round, and it would have probably looked a bit better on the front end. But in terms of the way it handles, I know now with that nice bit of cushion and tyre there, that this is going to suit the UK roads a lot better than, say, some of the competition models of the F Series. In terms of brakes, there's going to be two different options. There's going to be 6-pot steel versions, 6-pot on the front, I think there's single at the back, and there's going to be the carbon ceramics. So just like with the previous gen, but they are different brakes. And also you're going to get two different brake settings that we'll talk about once we get inside the car. On the steels, you don't have to just go for the blue. You can actually get a couple of other colours as optional extras as well to suit the paintwork of the car, because I think that M blue wasn't to everyone's taste, and also it did clash with blue paintworks if they weren't the same. So yeah, you can change your steel calipers for a lot less than going for the full carbon ceramics. It still retains those gorgeous rear arches, and the front wings are completely different and unique, but it's all about the rear arches for me on the M3. It always has been. I absolutely love them, and this is no disappointment at all. It just looks so aggressive, this car. We've also got some really big extended side sills, and this being the competition model, which is the only one we get in the UK, it actually has a two-tone to it. So the side sill is black and contrasts really well with the rest of the bodywork. And I think it just accentuates that sill as well, because if that was a body colour, although it might suit the car a little bit better, some would argue, being black, it actually accentuates it and just makes the whole side of the car look so aggressive. If it drives anywhere near as good as it looks, or anywhere near as aggressively as it looks, I just can't wait to get behind the wheel of it. Okay guys, we're now inside the M3. And we already know the regular G20 interior is very nice. It's a very special place to be with the operating system 7, the tech. And in fact, I go on about the G20 interior being the best interior on the market for that particular segment. And when you get inside here, I think the most important thing, a bit like on the outside of the car, is it feels really special in here. It doesn't just feel like a G20 with a few bits of carbon. It definitely has a divide between a normal 3 Series and an M car. What am I looking at? Well, the first thing I'm looking at are these amazing optional carbon bucket seats. They're incredible. They are going to retail at about £3,400, but I think they're worth every penny. They're unbelievably comfortable. And most importantly to me, they're really, really supportive. Massive, massive supports all over your body. They fit me really well. Just a reminder, I'm 6'4", and these feel fantastic. The most important thing about them for me is not how good they look and how comfortable and supportive they are, but the actual backrest on them is adjustable. So that moves back and forward, and that is really unique and new for a carbon bucket seat, because the fantastic sort of Porsche ones don't have an adjustable backrest, and they fit some people really well, but I never feel that comfortable in that particular seat just because I can't get comfortable. So driving position, well, it's just fantastic. I feel like I'm sitting about 3 or 4 inches lower than I do in my M2, and that's a common complaint for me with my M2, is I just don't feel like I'm ever sitting low enough. In this car, I feel like I'm sitting on the floor. It feels like a serious bit of kit. That's before anything. Just sitting this low in a car makes me feel, makes me feel like it's going to drive exceptionally well. Other things to point out in here, well, this has got the extended leather package, so we've got leather all over the place. That's going to be about £1,700, and it's really nice, and I can see that a lot of people are probably going to tick that box. Also carbon fibre absolutely everywhere. Now that's going to be standard in the UK, so on your M3 or on your M4, it's going to come standard with the carbon package, which is really nice. It's a gloss carbon, so not like the matte stuff and some of the earlier M2s, but it's really nice. There's a lot of carbon, and it really complements itself, especially with these optional seats that have got the same weave of carbon on it. There's not too many different types of carbon. That brings me to the steering wheel. It's a really nice feeling M steering wheel. Again, the standard wheel in a G20 is pretty decent, but this is just another level. Lots of carbon inserts on there. I've got an M badge at the bottom. Obviously, I've got the contrasting M stitching in the actual wheel. And the rim of it actually doesn't feel too thick. I'd go as far as saying it feels a bit thinner than the one that's in the M5 and the M8, which Again, if you're a regular on my channel, you know that's a good thing because I'm not a fan of massively thick rims. Behind the actual rim of the wheel, we've got these lovely carbon paddles, and they're totally different to what you find in any other M car that I've sat in before. They're really nice and long. Think sort of Giulia Quadrifoglio length, but they're not attached to the steering column, they're attached to the wheel. So in that sense, they're the same as what we're used to, but just a much nicer and bigger paddle. And I really like that, and I'm surprised it's taken them this long to get them on the wheel, because I think when you're out on track or when you're going out for a spirited drive, you've got more of a sort of adjustment with your hand as to where the paddle is, and you can find that paddle and give it a quick upshift while you're measuring your drifts. In terms of actual tech that's inside the interior over your normal 3 Series, well, we've got the M mode button, which is carried over now from the F90 M5 and the M8. And basically when you hit the M mode button, it can reduce the amount of dials and stuff that's going on in front of you. So when you're out on track and you put it into the M mode track mode, not only do you get a unique speedo, etc. in front of you and on the head-up display, but everything else can be switched off. So all of your pedestrian safety, your lane departure, all of those annoying things that you get when you're out on track turns off, so the car's not constantly trying to brake for you or move around. This car also has a setup button, again in line with the M5 and M8. So when you press that, you get a number of options that come up on the central display here that are either touch screen or controllable via the iDrive controller. So I've got engine, I've got chassis, steering, I've also got brakes. So just like in the M8, I can control the brakes between comfort and sport. So effectively in sport, they're going to have a bit more bite, be a bit more aggressive. That's the setting you're going to have when you take it out on track probably. But below all of that, and perhaps one of the best things and most exciting things I'm looking forward to when I drive this car, is it has a 10-way adjustable traction control in here. So I can see M traction, and I've got 10 different settings. So 1 being the lowest, so hardly any assistance with traction, and 10 being the highest, I guess almost like a default setting when you get in the car. So that's really cool, because I think the only other car I've seen something like that in is the AMG GTR, and it's really effective in that. And if anything, it's just another thing to talk to your mates down the pub about. So that's very cool. And again, it's just something that is far more special in this over your regular, let's say, 340i or M340i. Other bits to point out around the cabin are the galvanized controls. So all of the touch points, like the electric window buttons here, are just finished in a nicer sort of finish that you can't get on your regular G20. So just tiny little finishes and details like that just lift the interior of this car and let you know that you're in something special. But I'm just going to end with these seats once again. I know we started with them, but I can't tell you how special these seats are. They're incredible. And I think it's going to be a case of once you've sat in these, you're really not going to be too excited about sitting in many other seats out there in the market. The carbon bit between your legs is maybe a little bit questionable and might be a little bit bling for some people. And I'm not sure how a female with a reasonably short skirt's going to feel with a bit of carbon between her legs. But if we take that out of the equation, I think they're just fantastic. They're just stunning looking seats. They really, really are. I need one of these for my office chair to do all of my edits. It'd be really handy. I need to get out of here because all I want to do is start the car and take it out for a drive. So I look forward to that happening very soon. But can't complain about the interior. Really, really nice place to sit. The back end of this car is probably my favorite view. What I haven't talked about actually is the carbon roof, which looks absolutely stunning. It has been a standard feature on M3s and M4s before, but this one has got 2 lovely lines down the center of it and makes it look even more special than a normal carbon roof. We have this lovely boot spoiler, or gurney flap, I think BMW call it. This one's carbon because we've got the carbon exterior package. And then down the bottom, it looks so aggressive, like I'm talking DTM style. We've got a massive carbon diffuser with 4 huge pipes. I know the previous gen had 4 pipes. I know my M2 has 4 pipes, but these are huge. I think they're 100 millimeters in diameter each. Quick look at the M4. So this one is in frozen Portimao blue, and I think it looks absolutely stunning. It's hard to tell exactly what it looks like in the studio, because obviously when you're out in the light, it changes. To me, it's very similar to San Marino blue, if you like, but really suits this car. I think the most important thing to talk about with the M4 is how much more aggressive it looks compared to the previous generation. I always thought the previous gen looked too similar to a 420D with an M Performance pack on it. And that wasn't a bad thing in the sense that it drove like a proper M car, but it just never looked special enough. And I think the M3, for me at least, always stole that limelight with the really sort of accentuated arches, etc. It just looked far more aggressive. I think the M3 still looks more aggressive than the M4, but the M4 has just grown in stature. It just looks so much more menacing. It does share a similar silhouette to the M8 Coupe. It's got a really nice sloping roofline, again carbon fibre roof, all the same engine, same options pretty much. This one is very close to a base spec car, and in terms of pricing actually, we're talking just under 75 grand on the road for the M3 competition, and this one's about £1,300 more of a base spec. So similar to how it's always been, you always pay a little bit more for the 4 Series or the M4 compared to the 3 Series and the M3. This has got the normal steel brakes on it with the blue calipers, but obviously I think if this was mine, I'd probably maybe get them done in black to go with the rest of the car. This car also has the standard seats in it, which I can report are very comfortable and look really good. I do feel like I'm sitting a bit higher in this car than I am in the M3, but that might be because the M4 platform is a little bit higher or the actual seat mechanism is a bit higher, so I can't really tell you whether it's just the seats that sit a bit higher. But I have to say, as a standard fit seat, you won't be disappointed with these. They're gorgeous, and they're very similar to the ones in let's say the X3M competition, and actually even very similar to the M8 competition Grand Coupe that I just had. Very nice, very adjustable headrests, etc. And yeah, look the part from where you're seeing them. So I think my overall sort of opinion on this car is it's far more aggressive and far more special than the previous M4. And just like the M3, it really has bridge that gap between a regular 4 Series, let's say an M440i, and the full fat version. Just want to point out around the front, this doesn't have the M exterior package, so you can see that it's actually got a very different mouth effectively. You haven't got those massive carbon inlets here. You've got more of a traditional sort of mesh grille, which, yeah, I guess some people might prefer the way that looks, but there's no doubting, I think the carbon pack adds a bit more aggression around the front end of the car. In terms of rear cabin space, the M4 is definitely a lot tighter than the M3, as you'd expect, because this is a 2-door sports car or coupe. So what you gain on looks, you're going to lose on practicality. The boot is also a little bit smaller, but if you want practicality, you go for the M3, obviously. But don't think it's going to be as tight or small in the back as the M8 coupe, because ironically, to me at least, it feels bigger in there and a bit more spacious than the M8, which is a bigger car, which almost makes no sense. But yeah, it is possible to get 4 adults in there, but if you want 4 adults in space, then the M3 is the one to go for. But you're going to expect that because that is based on a 3 Series, which is a family car. Standing around the back of the M4, well, I can see along the side, its shoulders almost are far more accentuated compared to the last generation. I love this line coming over the rear arches, and actually, James pointed out something very obvious, but not so obvious to me earlier on, that although the rear arches look less accentuated than the ones on the M3, you've got to remember that rear panel is a lot longer, and they don't stick out quite as far as the M3, but they do stick out a fair amount, and it's just because it's over a longer distance that they look less flary, if you like. But from here, they look really sexy, like they're really, really nice, and that just flows into the back end along with the carbon roof. The light clusters are different, and there are a few little changes, obviously the way the rear wings flow into it and stuff, and the longer sloping roofline, but it looks equally good, and in fact is probably my favorite angle of this car, just like it was with the M3. Okay, the bit that most of you have probably been waiting for is what this sounds like. Now, just a quick reminder that this has obviously got all of the latest particulate filters in it, etc. But this car was built with all of that in mind, whereas the previous gen had to adapt to it. So never really sounded that good and seemed to get quieter and quieter throughout its life cycle. So that's in comfort, and you'll probably agree that it sounds very similar to a B58, a really nice sort of cold burble, but you wait until he switches it over into Sport Plus. Now hopefully the mic is picking that up. That's a really bassy tone, sounds amazing. That sounds like it's got an aftermarket exhaust on it, and I think for a car that's coming out of the factory in this day and age, I just can't wait to hear what that sounds like at the 7,200 red line. Big thumbs up from me. Let's have a rev actually. I'll get my glamorous assistant James to give it a rev. And that's only to about 3,000 RPM, so you can imagine what it's going to sound like at full chat. I'm really, really excited about that. It's lost all of that S55 sort of, I don't know, a bit of an off-tone note. It just sounds fantastic, sounds really serious, and as I say, I can't wait to see what it sounds like out on the road. Okay guys, hopefully you've enjoyed this video on the brand new G80 M3 and G82 M4. I'm going to have to wrap it now because I could literally stand here and talk about both of these cars all night long. I guess the next chance I'm going to have with these cars is actually driving them, and obviously that's the most important bit. But I hope that most of you agree that they are very, very special objects, and they've got lots of special features and differences between their sort of regular 3 and 4 series counterparts. So yeah, if I had to choose between either of these, you probably already guessed which one I'd choose. It would be the M3. I still think it looks better and more aggressive than the M4. It's a little bit cheaper. It is more practical as well. But I've always loved the 4-door M3, so that's my favorite. But taking nothing away from the M4, I think this is a really special car, and I can see this still selling in big numbers. Hopefully you enjoyed this video today. Give us a thumbs up if you did. Please leave any comments and questions below, and I'll see you at the next video. Thanks a lot.